A lot of brothers and sisters call and ask, can I have a Christmas tree? I want to have a Christmas tree. I want to adorn it with Christmas adornments, that hang from the tree. I want to have gifts at the bottom of the tree. I want to have a burning log, for example, in my fireplace. Should I join them? Should I do this? Now, before we go into that, let's look at the historical narration or the historical effect or where they come from historically. My apologies. The historical origin of these things. Are they Christian? Do they have anything to do with Christ himself or his mother Mary, peace be upon them? Now, one would say, well, what's the point of going back into history? And to that effect, we say, if you don't know where you're coming from, you would not know where to go. Imagine yourself walking in the jungle or in a forest, for those of the brothers that go camping. If you don't know the path that you have come from, you can very easily get lost. And that is why it is important for us to understand our history, to understand the history of the world, to know where we have come from, as to not fall into the same mistakes and issues. When we look at the Christmas that we have today, we see that it is a composite of different, whether Norse, Roman, Germanic, Anglo-Saxon parts that have come together to make the modern day Christmas. For example, the Norse used to celebrate the festival of Yule Festival, which was celebrated on December 21st, as well as the Mother Night celebration for the Anglo-Saxons. And what they would do is they would bring in evergreen trees. Evergreen trees are trees that do not die during the winter, or what we would call Christmas trees, right? They would bring those into their homes, and they would bring those as a sign of life, as a sign of the fact that life overtakes death. And this happens usually at the end of December, because those are usually the darkest and longest nights. Another thing they would do is the fathers and sons would go and collect the biggest logs they can, and they would set them aflame. Now, usually that would take about 7 days. They would have this log burning. Not a small log, usually very big logs, right? And this is as a sign of good fortune. And that's where we get the Christmas log from. That's where we get, where they sell the Christmas logs for you to burn at your furnace. Another thing they had is they would have what's called the Yule boar, which today we would call it holiday ham. Basically a piece of ham, wal'iyadu billah, that they would adorn and cook and eat. They would spice up and cook and eat. Another point they have, now they have a lot of things, but I'm going to focus on these four, is the Yule singing, where they would go from one place to a place and they would sing the equivalent of Christmas carols. The difference is that Christmas carols have a Christian twist onto them, and we'll come to that. Likewise, the Romans had their celebration of Saturnalia, which we're all familiar of. We've all heard about it, read about it, seen it on YouTube. Saturnalia, the celebration of Saturn, or the equivalent of Kronos in Greek mythology. Kronos being the father of Zeus, and we don't need to go into details. Nonetheless, he was considered the god of agriculture, and they would celebrate for about, I believe it was 6 to 7 days, the Saturnalia. Certain Roman cults used to celebrate Mithra. Mithra, which was a god that was shared by the Proto-Iranians and the Romans, who was the god of the sun. Some say it was Sol. Nonetheless, that's neither here nor there, but they would celebrate his birth, which was on December 25th. When the Christianity came in the 3rd and 4th century, they wanted to overtake the celebrations. They could not simply outlaw them. So they started changing certain things. One of the things that they did is the Christmas tree, they started adorning it with apples. These apples, these red apples, which later became the Christmas adornments, these things that you hang from the trees. They used to adorn it with apples representing heaven and the forbidden fruit. They started, for example, putting a star on the top of the tree, representing the star for the birth of Christ, representing the northern star. as well as they added a lot of things to try to kind of mask the pagan celebration. Now, when we come as Muslims, I want to celebrate Christmas. Should I put up a Christmas tree? Well, when we see, in reality, there is no connection between the evergreen tree and Christ himself, nor is there any relation between the Christmas tree and Mary. However, on the other hand, we do have a connection with a tree in Islam. The Quran in chapter 19, verse 25 says, وَهُزِّي إِلَيْكِ بِجِذْعِ النَّخْلَةِ, and shake towards you the trunk of the palm tree. It will drop fresh ripe dates upon you. وَهُزِّي إِلَيْكِ بِجِذْعِ النَّخْلَةِ تُسَاقَطُ عَلَيْكِ رُطَبًا جَنِيًّا فَكُلِي وَاشْرَبِي وَقَرِّي عَيْنًا. Eat and drink and rejoice and be happy. The palm tree, this tree that the Prophet in multiple occasions has spoken favorably of. He's spoken in favor of this tree. The dates that it gave, which was nourishment for the Arabs and for the Middle East. This is a tree that represents us, the Middle Easterns, that represents Islam. And there is a connection between this palm tree and Mary alayhi salam. Or as we say in Arabic, Maryam. Maryam alayhi salam sought refuge under this tree, leaned up against this tree, was fed by this tree. This is where Christ was born according to Islamic tradition. Now, therefore, when I want to celebrate, for example, instead of putting a tree that has nothing, no association with Christ, I can put up this tree that has an Islamic association with Mary, that has an Islamic association with Christ, and that has an association with our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So, as in a sense, I put an Islamic twist upon it. Number one. Another thing I would like to say is that our celebrations must be different. We are Muslims. We adhere to this faith of worship, this beautiful faith of tasamuh, of peace, of spreading the peace. We know that certain scholars who lived out in the West, on the day of Christmas, they would hand out roses and flowers to their neighbors, to their Christian neighbors, as a sign that we celebrate your celebrations. We celebrate your celebrations, whether Christ was born on the 25th of December or not. Again, most scholars say that he was born in later months, in the months of in the summer months or spring months, because according to the Bible, that there was a shepherd boy there, and shepherd boys don't usually go and feed their flock in the winter. Nonetheless, there is a connection there, and our scholars would celebrate this with them in an Islamic manner. One of our scholars, he prays on these days, and he sends the rewards of that prayer to Christ, salamullahi alayhi, to Jesus, son of Mary, or to Mary, or rather, more specifically, to our Imam al-Hujjah, ajallahu ta'ala farajahu sharif, the Imam who was the realization of the prophecies. We know in our history and our tradition that al-Hujjah alayhi salam is the realization of prophecies from Adam until the end of days. He is the one that will fill this world with peace and prosperity after it has been, and justice, after it has been filled with evil and mischief. Therefore, when we celebrate, we should celebrate in according to those understandings. Lastly, a point that I would like to make is that nothing in reality, nothing that is physical can come from something that is spiritual. Meaning what? Meaning you cannot do something spiritual such as celebrating and expect it to give you something physical in return. The spiritual world wants to elevate you spiritually. The spiritual effects you take part in wants to elevate you spiritually, not physically. The physical present is a sidestep. The physical presence that you give to each other is for you and each other. However, the spirituality that is shared between us is much greater than the physical gift that we give. Hence, we see in the West, and even here, people are more focused on giving presents and looking a certain way and joining a certain celebration as opposed what that celebration stands for. When I'm celebrating Christmas, am I celebrating Christmas because I want to uphold the manners and ethics of Christ himself? Or am I celebrating simply because I have time off from work and everybody's celebrating and everybody's giving gifts, so let me join and give gifts and celebrate? If that's the case, then I'm going to tell you right now, go ahead, give gifts and celebrate, but that's a waste of time. Take that time, apply that time, give gifts, join your friends, celebrate with your friends. However, use this time to elevate yourself and those around you spiritually. And let's not lose our identities, brothers and sisters. Our identities is what separates us from everybody else, and it is what keeps us connected to everyone else. It is because of our identity as Muslims, as the followers of the Prophet and his Ahlul Bayt, that we are connected to the world. I do not want to be absolved into a world that does not have any value, spiritual or physical. Rather, I want to be a part of this world in my own way, in the way of Islam, in the way where I respect the individual in front of me, whether they are Christian, whether they are Muslim, whether they are Jewish, whether they are agnostic, whether they are non-believers, whatever their faith might be. I respect them as an equal to me in this world, as my brother and sister in humanity. And I expect them to accept me as a Muslim, as their equal in humanity. And I will finish by repeating the hadith of Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen when he says, people are of two types. إما أخ لك في الدين أو نظير لك في الخلق. Either your brother in faith or your equal in humanity. والحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة على محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين.